afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. I just got back from seeing Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and I'm not gonna lie, I thought the movie was average. I went to see it like way down in Pilla. Like, for anyone who lives in Iowa, I went down to see at the Pilla Cinema because I was curious to see how that theater would be like. And I'll get more to that in a minute. But I kind of wanted to see what the theater was like. And I've been trying to do that for a while, ever since my last visit to Pilla, which was months ago. But originally I was gonna see some different movie. I can't remember what it was, but I lost that chance a while ago. So I just waited for the next one that seemed mildly interesting. And I originally wasn't gonna go today because technically I got work tomorrow morning, but there were only two studios that were opened because the other one was broken down or something. And yesterday when I checked the screenings, they were playing A Man Named Otto and 80 for Brady. And then when I checked it this morning, I guess they swapped out 80 for Brady with Ant-Man. So I decided, screw it, I'll just watch it in the afternoon. So that's basically how I spent my afternoon. Driving all the way down there, seeing the movie, and now I'm heading home. But I'll be honest, I wasn't too interested in seeing the movie itself. I've seen the first Ant-Man, and I think I saw it through YouTube or another streaming service. This was before Disney Plus. I know I didn't see it in the theater because I remember back in 2015, it was a few months after I saw Age of Ultron. I asked my dad if he wanted to see Ant-Man, and he said no because it didn't really interest him. And the reason why was because when he was around my age, he was a pretty big fan of Marvel Comics, and he told me that Ant-Man was never really one of those big A-list characters, he and the Wasp, for that matter. They were kind of more of side characters for the Avengers, right? They weren't really big name characters like Captain America or Iron Man or the Hulk or Thor, those guys. So we ended up not seeing Ant-Man, at least not in the theater. I saw the first one. I thought it was fairly unique. I never saw the second movie. Still haven't, because it just didn't look interesting to me. The most I saw of it was the post-credit scene that showed that Scott Lang got trapped in the quantum realm during Thanos' snap. But seeing as how this movie is where they were going to introduce Kang the Conqueror, as in the actual Kang the Conqueror, instead of the variant who appeared in Loki season 1, I decided what the hell, I'll see it. Especially since Kang has been hyped up as the next Thanos level villain, and so I guess to get this out of the way, I'm eventually going to talk about spoilers, but I'll give a forewarning on when that actually happens. So, I don't really want to go do a play-by-play of this movie, because I'm pretty sure that some people are interested in seeing it, but I'm just going to go in the broad strokes. Basically, it starts out just with Ant-Man doing the narration about his life, what he's been up to ever since the events of Endgame. Apparently he's written a book, he's gotten famous, similar to the Hulk did, similar to what the Hulk did at the start of Endgame, where he's now like a famous celebrity. People know him, like they like praise him for like helping save the world, saving the universe, really. Even that guy in the trailer who says "Thank you, Spider-Man," like that's part of the whole montage of like everybody thanking him for like, you know, defeating Thanos, right? So, but basically, Scott finds out that his daughter Cassie, who's now grown up, she's played by a different actress. The actress's name is Catherine Newton. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest. I liked her more in the movie Freaky that came out a few years ago. The one where it's basically Freaky Friday, but as a slasher, where she basically has to play both a high schooler and she has to play a serial killer who ends up being Vince Vaughn. I'll be honest, I liked her acting better in that film than in this one. But maybe I'm biased because I like horror movies. But basically, Scott finds out that his daughter keeps getting into trouble and getting arrested and everything. So he tries to connect with her, and that's when Cassie reveals that she and Hank and Janet have been working on like this basically beacon to the quantum realm. And Janet has been helping them, Hope has. But when Janet does find out that they're basically sending a signal down to the quantum realm, she tries to stop them, but it ends up sucking them into the quantum realm. And that's basically that's basically like the whole movie. They get trapped in the quantum realm. They meet Kang the Conqueror. Kang basically forces Scott to help him, or else he's gonna kill Cassie. That's really the whole movie. Paul Rudd does pretty good as Scott Lang. Although I think they were laying too thick on the comedy, because it's like I didn't find myself laughing as much as the movie probably wanted the audience to. I mean, a few other people laughed in the theater at times, but mostly it was kind of silent. I mean, the characters just feel like, to me, they feel like they didn't really progress at all in the movie. I mean, they're still superheroes, they're still Avengers. The only bit I got from it was that, like, Scott was trying to reconnect with his daughter, and he just wished that he had more time because, like, he even said in the movie that he's missed quite a few birthdays because of Thanos' snap, right? But aside from that, there were a few kind of comedic moments. Actually, the most laughs I got were really from the villains, and technically you got three of them. I mean, obviously you have Kang, and then you got MODOK, who's basically like the Darth Vader to Kang's Emperor, especially towards the end of the film. And then you got Bill Murray, who he basically shows up for an extended cameo, which is a shame because aside from MODOK, he seems like he's having the most fun out of everyone in the movie. Like, he really hams it up, and I just wish that we had more of him because he's only in it for about like 5 or 10 minutes, and it's towards the very beginning. Well, not very towards the beginning, but he's there like about 10 minutes into when they reach the quantum realm, and he reveals that he had a history with Jana. Eventually, when she left at the end of character to kind of like turning like more serious. I actually did like that, because like it kind of shows like the gravity of like who Kang is and like what he can do to basically force people to work for him. But again, unfortunately, like they killed him off way too quick, and then we just got MODOK and Kang, which, by the way, I think there were a lot of theories that MODOK is Darren, aka the Yellow Jacket from the first movie. That's all true. What happened was like when Scott like destroyed the Yellow Jacket suit, and he shrunk down into the quantum realm. Like, he didn't die, but I think everything else except his head got shrunk down. So that's how he became MODOK, and I don't know, I mean, I've seen a lot of people say like he looks like ugly and too much CGI, and like maybe they're right on the CGI part, but like that's how he's supposed to look in the comics. And like he has some funny moments. I think they did try to lean into the self-awareness of like basically him just being a giant head, like in the comics, because again, that's how he's supposed to look. But there are times where I think they lay it on too thick, especially towards the end. But one thing I did have a problem with is that like they completely threw away like everything about MODOK, aside from the fact that like he's just a giant head. Because if I remember correctly, in the comics, he was created by AIM to basically be like a super organism, right? And I haven't read a lot of like old school Marvel comics in a while, but as I recall, like once MODOK was created, like he assumed control of AIM, right? I'm welcome to be corrected if I'm wrong on that, but I'm not sure if I am, because as I recall, like, I mean, pardon the French, but like I don't remember MODOK being AIM's bitch, especially not like Kang's, or heck, I don't even remember MODOK or Kang meeting up in the comics. But either way, I don't know, I feel like, I mean, the stuff that worked was like the humor with MODOK being a giant head, but I still feel like at the end of the day, like they probably should have just saved MODOK for a later film. Like, say, like, I know that AIM was used as kind of like the central villain of Iron Man 3 with Aldrich Killian creating Extremis, but I feel like they could have done something that could have brought AIM back, and they could have like created MODOK as like the version from the comics, and they could have saved them for like, say, I don't know, make them the villains of the new Captain America movie, which, according from what I've read, like they're not going to be in the movie at all. But Thunderbolt Ross is going to be the main bad guy. I mean, at least that's what I've heard. So fine, but I don't know. I feel like they underutilized MODOK, and I think he was in the movie for the wrong reasons. As for Kang, I mean, aside from Bill Murray, I think I feel like the guy who played Kang, like Jonathan Majors, I feel like he had a lot of fun in his role. Like, I mean, I feel like all the villains like had the most fun in this film, which feels weird saying that, but I feel like Jonathan Majors and Bill Murray probably had the most fun, because Kang is supposed to be like a larger-than-life villain, and I do feel like for a while at least, like they actually showed like how just I have Bill Murray's expression just immediately change from like having fun and like really hamming it up to like to turning him like all serious just on like dying. And unfortunately, like with MODOK, I feel like they wasted his character. Well, I'll get to more of that in a minute. Because about the quantum realm itself, I believe I read somewhere that Kevin Feige or whoever said that this movie was basically like the Star Wars of the MCU, like even more so than Guardians of the Galaxy. And I definitely see it, because there's a lot of areas that like they actually feel like they pulled it from Star Wars, which is both good and bad. I mean, good because like it does look like a fun spectacle, but also bad because, well, they rip stuff off of Star Wars. Like the worlds, like they look like plans or systems from Star Wars. Like the moment they arrive, like it looks like some worlds from the prequels, specifically Episode 3, which is fine. Like I didn't have a problem with the prequel movies, but again, it feels like they ripped them off. There's some organisms or whatever from that are shown in the quantum realm that look like they're straight out of that look like they literally copy pasted some aliens from Star Wars and like just threw them like a different coat of paint, which again is okay, but again they ripped off Star Wars. Like it felt like I was watching Star Wars. Like for a movie that is supposed to like basically start the multiverse saga, as they call it. Like I was sort of expecting something. I was sort of expecting something like Multiverse of Madness, but on a grander scale. Even though I've said before that Multiverse of Madness was a bit of a letdown because they only show like 2 or 3 different worlds, and that was it. But I don't know, like I guess I kind of expected them to show like all these weird and wacky organisms because like they shrunk down.
In half a mile, turn right onto Iowa 163 Business West.
Thank you, GPS. But I'm gonna wait for a return for this one. But
turn right onto Iowa 163 Business West. Continue on Iowa 163 Business West for 2 miles.
But anyway, like, I don't know, I feel like that the quantum realm could have been a little bit more creative in showing like all the different like creatures that were in there, instead of like just completely ripping off of Star Wars. But maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just how I feel. But when I was looking at it, that's literally all I saw, like just a copy paste of Star Wars. Everything else was okay. Like the music was okay. Like the characters themselves were all right. I mean, I do feel like they laid the comedy on thick, because like this is where I get into spoilers. So if you guys don't want to see spoilers, you want to see the movie for yourself, like come back to this video eventually. But I'm about to end spoiler territory. Okay, 3, 2, 1. All right. So towards the end of the movie, well. Okay, starting back a little bit, there is one more kind of thing I am going to mention before getting into spoilers, but it does sort of segue into it, that I felt for a straight hour the pacing was off. Like basically, from the start of when they get into the quantum realm to to the point where they actually like explain who Kang is instead of just calling him like he or him or like the Conqueror, that kind of thing. And the pacing just feels off, where I get it that like when they first get to the quantum realm, like they're separated by...
In a quarter mile, turn right onto Iowa 117 North, South State Street.
Sorry, that's gonna get annoying. But they're basically split off by Scott and Cassie.
Turn right onto Iowa 117 North, South State Street.
They're basically split off by Scott and Cassie are in one location, and then Hank, Janet, and Hope.
Continue on Iowa 117 North for 5 miles.
And then Hank, Hope, and Janet are in another location, which if they were trying to just show that like the stuff that Scott and Cassie are doing and then the stuff that Hope, Janet, and Hank are doing are like all happening at the same time, and that's why I kept cutting between the two groups, fine, I get it, but it felt like they were literally cutting like scenes in half, right? Like there's one specific moment where Scott and Cassie are brought to what's basically like this tribe or like camp of like freedom fighters who are fighting against Kang, and like the freedom fighters are trying to figure out like what to do with Scott and Cassie, and they're first trying to have like Scott drink this ooze, and like out of nowhere like they show Cassie, who's already drunk it, and she tells him like, well, Dad, you have to drink the ooze, because later they reveal that that's how they're going to understand like the organisms, right? And Scott has no idea what the ooze is or whatever, so like he's asking like, oh, what's the ooze or anything? Immediately cuts to what the Pims are doing, and I can't even remember what they're kind of doing. Like, oh yeah, so Janet gets in contact with like another group of these organisms, creatures, and like they're waiting for like the pseudo leader of that like little posse or whatever to show up, and then it immediately cuts back to Scott and Cassie, and Scott is basically forced to drink the ooze, which admittedly kind of reminds me of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when Indiana drinks like the blood of that one deity god that turns him evil. So I don't know if that was their intention, but that's two George Lucas, Steven Spielberg projects that they've kind of ripped off of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, which they later rip off Indiana Jones by going after this like glowing MacGuffin, which funny enough, Guardians of the Galaxy already did that. So they're basically ripping off of a previous MCU project that has already ripped off Star Wars, but whatever. But my point is, like, they keep cutting scenes. Like, it feels like they just cut it up for a straight hour until they finally reveal, like, Janet's history with Kang, right? And that history is that, like, she saved Kang's life, and, like, she helped him, like, rebuild his ship, which was a time machine, basically, because all the other variants of Kang banished him, because he was too extreme, or whatever, and they keep on changing it up that, like, oh, he was, like, too extreme or dangerous for the other Kangs, or, like, oh, he was trying to save everybody, but the other Kangs decided to sabotage his ship and banish him to the quantum realm. And I don't know, I just feel like they're both way too contrasting. I mean, himself, like the one who appears in the movie, he's basically saying like, oh well, he's trying to save everyone from the other kings. Meanwhile, everybody else is saying that he was too extreme and that's why he was exiled. Which, I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a weak backstory for King, but that's just me. But I haven't even talked about like King specifically yet, aside from the actor's portrayal. But eventually, I'm gonna need to speed this along. But that basically
In half a mile, turn left onto County Highway F48 West, East State Street.
That's basically like what I was thinking about the editing. Like for just half the film, it feels like the pacing was just off. At least until Scott reunites with the Pims and everyone.
Turn left onto County Highway F48 West, East State Street.
The effects were okay. There were a few times, like with Darren or MODOK, that felt like the
Continue on East State Street for half a mile.
Shit, it's kind of darker. There were a few times where like the effects were just obvious, especially the parts where there's multiple big people. Because like Cassie has her own suit, so she can shrink down and grow. And there's like a particular scene where like Cassie and Scott are like big, and they just hug and they just make jokes and everything. Like
in a quarter mile, turn right onto Iowa 117 North, South Walnut Street.
And I feel like that was one of the most obvious CGI scenes. Like there's even this scene where there's like millions of Scott Langs and millions.
Turn right onto Iowa 117 North, South Walnut Street.
And millions of Hope that didn't feel like that obvious of CGI as the bit where both Langs are just giant. And then like obviously
continue on Iowa 117 North for 12 miles.
And then there's obviously like MODOK just being a huge head. But other than that, the CGI and effects looked fine. My biggest pet peeve was just again, the pacing and editing just felt off to me. And then there's the fact where I thought that the story was just weak. I'm sorry, but it was and this is what makes me think that Martin Scorsese was right, that a lot of these Marvel movies just aren't cinema. They're just amusement park rides. And I'm sorry, but he's kind of right on this kind of stuff. I think I said this way back during my review of Multiverse of Madness, but I actually used to disagree on that. I thought that Scorsese was kind of an asshole for saying that, but now, ever since Phase 4 happened, really ever since Multiverse of Madness happened, I feel like he's right on it. I feel like there wasn't that much of a story in this one, aside from just Scott trying to reconnect with his daughter, and it felt like there wasn't that much to it. I'm sorry, but that's how I felt. I mean, if you wanna go and see the spectacle of just the quantum realm being there for 2 hours, there's that. But I feel like the story wasn't as good as the first movie. But that's just me. So moving on from the whole spectacle of it all, moving on to Kang as a villain, I feel like he was portrayed as like an actual threat for up till about the final few moments. And this is the part where I'm talking about spoilers, because Kang, like, they keep propping Kang up as like the next like big MCU threat. Like, he's supposed to be like a multiversal threat, not just a universal one like Thanos was, right? And they technically spent 6 years building Thanos up, ever since the first Avengers movie. I mean, I know that people are saying that like the Infinity Saga was like built up for like 10 years, you know, but really it was just 6 years ever since the first Avengers film. Like, basically phase 1 was sort of like the prelude, right? Because that was just like building up the Avengers, right? It didn't really build up the Infinity Saga. At least I didn't think it did. Like, they didn't even show Thanos until the mid-credit scene of the first Avengers movie. I mean, yeah, they did mention that that he's the guy who controlled the Chitauri. He's the one who like basically tasked Loki with taking over Earth. But like, they didn't really show who Thanos was until like the very end of the movie during the credits, right? And then like Kane here, like, they're building him up as a huge threat, as like he was like so extreme for his variants that like they trapped him in the quantum realm. Kind of similar to Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, where like Alfred said that like he was too extreme for the League of Assassins, the League of Shadows, as it's called in the Batman, in the Nolan movies, that he was too extreme for them, that Ra's al Ghul exiled him, right? So they kept building him up, and like Janet was so terrified of him that she didn't mention him at all to Hank or Janet, which I kind of understand that. Like, despite Hank and Janet I keep mistaking Janet and Hope, and maybe that's because both of them were the Wasp, but both Hank and Hope are just browbeating her about like how she never talked about the quantum realm after she got back, right? And after she explains like who Kang is and like what he can do, I can sort of understand that, because like I mean with how terrified she was with trying to get them to stop that beacon to the quantum realm, let's be honest, most likely she was traumatized by Kang, right? And like, even in the real world, like, people with trauma and like post-traumatic stress disorder, like, it's harder for them to come out and talk about like their experiences, right? I mean, I know it's different universes, but like in TV shows like Arrow, right? Oliver Queen didn't talk about like everything that happened with him on the island, because like it was some dark stuff. Like, even in the first 5 episodes, when he's basically he decides to take a lie detector test on like everything that he's experienced, and like and he basically forces himself to come clean about like what happened to him on the island, like, because originally he said that he was alone for 5 years, but he basically forces himself to reveal that like, no, there were other people on the island, but he didn't want to talk about it because like those people tortured him, right? Like, he didn't want to talk about like those people on the island. He didn't want to talk about Slade Wilson because he betrayed him. He didn't want to talk about like the later years where he ended up in Hong Kong or Russia or back on the island, where it was being run by a guy who was trying to look for like this magical artifact, because like the dude had like post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So I can kind of, I can totally see why Janet like didn't want to talk about the quantum realm, but at the same time, well, this isn't really Janet's fault, but it was kind of a stupid move for Hank and Hope and Cassie to basically leave out the whole quantum realm battery and just keep that from both Scott and Janet for some reason. I don't know. I feel like that's a bit of a plot hole where, at the very least, if they told Janet about it and she explained like why they shouldn't do it, that would have saved them like a whole lot of trouble. But anyway, going back to Kang for a minute, like, they build him up on like just how much of a threat he is, and like almost immediately after Janet explains like what he can do, like the reason why she made sure to keep them both trapped, like they immediately cut to actually showing the current version of Kang, and like he immediately demands that Scott like help him, and when he refuses, he starts torturing both him and Cassie. And like, well, I feel like they were doing everything right. They were explaining who he is, like what he can do. They show him like torturing the main characters, and then they throw it up. Oh, and like later on in the film, once Scott gets what he wants, he and Hope start fighting Kang, and like he literally bitch slaps them, and then just takes Janet away. And they're doing everything right, where like they're building him up as a threat, showing him as a threat, showing him that like, I mean, he even says it himself that Ant-Man is out of his league, right? Even when Scott says that like he's an Avenger and he's called the other ones, like I don't know if Kang knows that it's a bluff, but the way he reacts to it, like I don't think he cares if it's a bluff or not, because he even says like, oh, he's killed many versions of the Avengers, including Thor, to the point where he thinks that Ant-Man is Thor at one point. Like that's how little significance that the Avengers have to him. At that point, like Scott, at that point, like Kang doesn't care if Scott is lying or not, right? And it's not up until like the final few moments where they basically throw all that away, right? Because here's the spoiler: at the end of the movie, Cassie starts this like uprising, and basically starts this entire war between Kang's forces and like basically everybody else in the quantum realm. And eventually Kang just comes down himself after Scott destroys his time machine. And like this is one of the only times where like I actually laughed out loud in the theater. Like Scott makes himself big, and he just starts screaming at Kang that like, Kang, we had a deal, like our word is our bond, that kind of stuff. And I don't know if it was intentional or not, but it just made me laugh my ass off. But anyway, so Kang's forces fight basically the freedom fighters in the quantum realm, right? And eventually Kang comes down himself, does the whole like final do it myself, and just starts vaporizing everybody, which forces the freedom fighters to retreat, leaving just Scott, Hope, and Cassie. And they have their little moment of just like the three of them fighting Kang, similar to like the Trinity Avengers, like Captain America, Thor, and Ant-Man fighting Thanos. And like, you know, obviously Kang just squashes them. But then like there's that whole like endgame moment where Hank shows up with like these super...
In half a mile, turn left onto Northeast Peach Road.
Hank shows up with these super intelligent ants that just begin to tear Kang apart. And then, like, you know, at one point, Hank makes that comment about, like, oh, I know that socialism is, like, a bad word.
Turn left onto Northeast Peach Road.
I know that socialism is a bad word, but, like, we could learn a lot from these ants. And that scene just made me groan. Because, like...
Continue for 14 miles.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, this movie is still a Marvel film, which is made by Disney. And let's be honest, Disney has no business lecturing anybody about socialism. Like, they are at their core, like, a capitalist company. Like, I'm not even talking bad about capitalism, but Disney at its fundamentals is about capitalism and consumerism. Like, they got no legs to stand on. They have no foundation to talk about socialism at all. But let's be honest, that was just used to appease, like, the Chinese market. Anyway, I don't know, that little mini rant is over, but so the ants basically tear Kang apart, right? And then, like, the Langs and the Pyms, like, are able to create a portal to get back to, like, their world. And Scott's the last one to leave, but Kang stops him because somehow Kang survived getting what what looked like he was getting mauled by ants. But no, apparently no, it just stripped away his armor and his tech. So, which is kind of ironic because I remember in, like, the original Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon, Kang was, like, at least distracted by ants in his first episode. In the first episode that, like, he appeared as a threat to the Avengers. But I don't know, it just feels weird here. Like, even though the ants are, like, super intelligent now, it just feels weird that, like, basically the big villain who's supposed to be, like, the multiversal threat, the threat that's even worse than Thanos, just gets taken out by ants. But anyway, so Kang shows up again. He basically loses all of his tech. So he engages Scott in a fist fight, which, interestingly enough, Scott just forgets about how he can shrink down and grow again. Because, like, you know, if he did that, like, he could just squash Kang like a bug. But he decides to go for, like, hand-to-hand combat with Kang. And throughout the whole thing, like, Kang, like, keeps yelling, like, yeah, like, while he's hitting Scott. Which, I guess that's implying he knows karate or kung fu at some point. I don't know, but, I mean, basically, Kang kicks the dude's ass. Which, I kind of expect that, since the guy who's playing him, Jonathan Majors, he's also playing, like, the main antagonist in Creed 3. I haven't seen those movies. The only Rocky movie I've actually seen from start to finish was Rocky 4 with Ivan Drago. And that was the director's cut that came out for one night only, too, like, a few years back. But basically, Kang and Ant-Man get into a fist fight. And that was really the main selling point for me to see the film. Like, when the trailers happened and it showed just Kang and Scott just having, like, a bare knuckles brawl. I'll be honest, that was the selling point for me to go and see the film. Like, it wasn't the big spectacle because, again, like, they were ripping off Star Wars. But, well, I don't know, I just felt like that was the main draw for me, just seeing Kang get into a fist fight with Scott. And, I mean, obviously it was a cool fight. And obviously Scott didn't die because at the last minute, Hope comes in, saves him, and they basically knock him into his power battery, which explodes and it kills this version of Kang, which I'll get to that in a minute. But there's two problems that I had with this whole climax. I feel like, one, I know that the MCU has been a little bit trigger happy in killing off their major main characters. Like, they killed off Black Widow, they killed off Iron Man, they might as well have killed off Captain America at the end of Endgame. They killed off Vision in Infinity War. I mean, I know he was kind of like a lesser character compared to all the other Avengers, but like, he was still a pretty important character. I mean, he was played by Paul Bettany. He was played by Paul Bettany, who was with the MCU ever since the very beginning. Like, he voiced Jarvis. But I don't know, I feel like if there was any MCU character that would have been justified to kill off, it would have been Ant-Man. Especially because, again, ever since, like I said, at the very beginning of this video, like, he was never that big of a character in the comics. Or at least that's from what I heard. But he was never that big of an Avenger. I mean, at the very beginning of the movie, that one guy was calling him Spider-Man, right? But aside from that, like, I mean, again, Kang is supposed to be like the next level threat, right? So it would make sense if he killed off Ant-Man in his own movie. But no, he not only does Ant-Man survive, but they kill off Kang in his first movie. Technically, it's his first movie. I mean, He Who Remains appeared at the end of Loki season 1, but technically, like, the version of Kang the Conqueror that people know from the comics, this is the only movie that he's shown up in, and they killed him off. And that completely just threw away any semblance of threat that he might have been, because now that they've killed him off, like, all that stuff he was talking about, how, like, he's killed multiple Avengers, he's killed Thor, he's killed, like, multiple variants of the Avengers, to the point where, like, it's just become blurry to him, where, like, he even mistakes Ant-Man for Thor. Like, I gotta call bullshit now, because there is no way that this version of Kang the Conqueror not only conquered so many worlds, but killed off so many versions of the Avengers, and then he just gets taken out by Ant-Man, like, in his first outing. But whatever, you do you, Marvel. So Kang gets killed off. Ant-Man and Hope return to the Quantum Realm with their families. It basically the film ends how it began, with Scott narrating him walking down the street. He goes back to that one shop owner who mistook him for Spider-Man. And this was like the second time that I laughed out loud in the theater. Like, where the old guy, like, he remembers who he is. Like, oh yeah, he's Ant-Man. He's like the bug guy who shrinks and grows big. And, like, he's the bug guy. And because of that, he starts charging him for his coffee, right? Because back at the beginning of the film, when he thought that he was Spider-Man, he didn't charge him at all, right? And apparently that has happened multiple times before. But now that he knows that he's Ant-Man, the bug guy, now he charges him like $12.99 for the coffees, which I thought that was funny. So anyway, Ant-Man gets his coffee. He gets like a birthday cake for Cassie, and then while he's walking down the street, he starts having doubts, like, oh, did I do the right thing? Because, like, Kang said that, like, if he dies, then, like, multiple versions of him will come and start, like, conquering the timelines and stuff like that. And while he's doing it, again, going back to the whole editing thing, like, not really with the pacing, but with the editing choices, he starts thinking, like, oh, well, what if Kang was right? What if, like, I did doom our universe, like, the multiverse? And while he's doing it, like, it cuts to random shots of just people walking down the street. And personally, I feel like it would have been more impactful if, like right after Scott's narration, like it would have like reused some audio of Kang talking about how like, if you don't help me, if I stay trapped here, then the other variants of me are gonna come and they're going to like make it even worse. And then it will cut to Scott's memories of like Cassie, of Hope, of Hank, of Janet, and like, screw it, throw in the other Avengers, because why not? But no, they just showed random strangers walking along the street. But whatever. But Scott, being Scott, quickly just dismisses it, saying like, oh, I'm sure it was nothing. And then it ends with them celebrating Cassie's birthday and like Scott choking on the cake, I guess. And that's how the film ends. There were two post-credit scenes. I only stuck around for the first one, where it shows like basically an arena full of Kangs, and like the three main Kangs, like one of them looks like sort of like the cyborg, who immediately made me think of the High Evolutionary, who's gonna show up in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And maybe the reason why I thought about that is because he's gonna be in, maybe because like that trailer showed up before the film started. And I don't know, maybe he's gonna be the main villain, maybe not. I don't know if I'm gonna see it. I've only seen the second one, and that's because it was on Netflix at the time. But basically it's a cyborg guy who somehow knows that the version of them that was exiled got killed off. And he's with this Pharaoh version of Kang, and this other version of Kang who I want to say is supposed to be like this alien Kang, like, again, ripping off of Star Wars. But I'm not too certain about that. But basically, like, the three of them come together and they call in like all the variants of Kang, and all the Kangs in the arena are just like screaming and hooting and hollering. Like, it just looks comical to me, but also stupid at the same time. And this goes back to me saying like they basically throw away Kang being a threat, because like they basically killed off the main version of Kang, the version that like everyone knows from the comics, the one who has like the iconic costume and visor and everything. And now they just show like, oh well, there's like multiple variants of Kang, so like even if you kill one, just like another one's gonna take his place. Like, as weird as it is, it's kind of like Chucky season 2. Kind of like how where like Chucky split his soul into like 72 different dolls. So like, you know, if you kill another one, like there's just gonna be another one.
In half a mile, turn right.
And like, even though they killed off the main Chuckies throughout the course of the season, like there's still one of them that just keeps coming back, right? So like, there's no stakes. There were no stakes in Chucky season 2. I mean, I already did my review of that season.
Turn right.
Like, I already did my review of Chucky season 2, and it's kind of similar to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Like, there were no stakes, right? If they wanted to have stakes and like really elevate Kang as a threat, they should have just had him kill Scott. But anyway, so that was the first mid-credit scene of like all the variants of Kang coming together and deciding like, oh, we're gonna take over the multiverse now because one of our own got killed. Which brings me to my next point. Why would they get mad that the variant they banished got killed?
Continue on US 30 West for 6 miles.
They're the ones who sent into the quantum realm. Why on earth would they get mad that he got killed off? Why? I mean, if they want to go with the blood is thicker than water thing, I feel like that's a weak excuse, especially for like multiversal variants. So that was the first post-credit scene. I didn't stick around for the second post-credit scene because Like, it was just Loki and Owen Wilson's character, Mobius, showing up in the 1920s, I think. And, like, they find a variant of Kang, who's, like, a magician or whatever. And Mobius even, like, is doubting Loki about him, about, like, saying, like, even sounds like, Loki, this is the guy that you're so scared of? I mean, I didn't stick around in the theater for this. I saw it on YouTube. And, like, I kind of have to agree with Mobius after seeing the film. Like, I don't know why Loki's so scared of Kang. Because A, this is a version who's from the 1920s. And B, he got killed by Ant-Man. A variant of his got killed by freaking Ant-Man. Like, again, I don't see him as a threat anymore. They killed him off in his first movie. So, I don't know, unless they do something really big in the next Avengers film, like, I don't see any stakes showing up. Like, he has to kill, like, he basically has to kill the main versions of the Avengers for me to take him as a threat. Because, like, if he kills, like, different multiverse versions of them, I'm not gonna care. Like, it's like in Multiverse of Madness when Scarlet Witch killed off, like, those, the Illuminati. Like, she killed off versions that I didn't care about. I mean, yeah, they had Professor X show up, and they had, like, John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic, but they were different versions of the characters. I didn't care, and they brought them in just for one movie just to get killed off. And they treated Kang the same way, like, they killed him off. And even like I said, with the parallels to Endgame, like, they already did their huge, like, big war with the villain and his lackeys, right? And they wasted it on this movie. So, unless they do something, like, even bigger, then I'm not gonna be interested in, like, Avengers Secret Wars, the Kang Dynasty, or whatever he is. But that's enough talk about the film itself. Like, the main reason why...
In 2 miles, take exit 158 for 19th Street toward Nevada.
The main reason why I went and saw this in Pella to begin with was because, so at this point, I'm done with my movie, like, my feature film that I've been talking about. The one that's basically an anthology of, like, all the short films that I've done over the last 4 years. And I'm also finished with the trailer. And maybe this is a little bit ambitious for me, but I kind of want to play it in a theater. And originally, I got the idea after seeing Home Alone in the Camelot Theater way back in my hometown. So I'd like to show the film there, but if that doesn't work, I was also hoping on maybe like having a private screening of the film at the Pella Cinema. Like, that's the reason why I went to see Ant-Man in that theater, because, like, I wanted to see, like, what that theater was like. And basically, the theater was kind of like...
In half a mile, take exit 158 for 19th Street toward Nevada.
Basically, that theater was similar to the one at Camelot, just bigger, right? It had the same, like, old school feel of, like, the foldable seats, and, like, just the big...
Take exit 158.
The slightly smaller screen, you know? Actually, I'm going a little bit further. But...
In a quarter mile, turn right onto South 19th Street.
But that's the reason why I went to Pella instead of seeing it over at the theater that I usually do. Because
Head west on US 30 West, 240th Street.
I wanted to see.
Continue on US 30 West for 1 mile.
I wanted to see, what this theater was like, and well, I liked the theater itself. The tickets were affordable. Like, I went to see it at a matinee, but even if I went to see like a regular night showing, the tickets would have been pretty cheap. The snacks would have been great. Like, it doesn't cost an arm and a leg like it does at the theater that I usually do. I just wish it wasn't so freaking far away.
In half a mile, turn right.
But I would have loved to screen that movie there. Unfortunately, when I talked with the people who were running it at the time, they don't do private screenings, and they especially don't do private screenings for what.
Turn right.
They especially don't do private screenings for what I was trying to do. They did say that you can rent out the theater.
Continue for 3/4 of a mile.
To stream a different movie, but you have to go through like the studio.
Head west on 240th Street toward West 3rd Street, 620th Avenue. In a 1/4 mile, turn right onto West 3rd Street, 620th Avenue. Turn right onto West 3rd Street, 620th Avenue.
They said that you can rent out the theater to stream a
Continue for 1 mile.
but you have to go through the studio.
Head west on US 30 West.
And just create.
Continue on US 30 West for 3/4 of a mile.
It's just not worth the trouble. So that's off the board. So I'm back to square one, basically.
In half a mile, turn right onto West 18th Street.
But all in all, like, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania was an okay film. Like, if you want to see it just for the spectacle, just to see the quantum realm, like, go ahead and see it. It's alright. I still feel
Turn right onto West 18th Street.
I do still feel like they wasted Kang by killing him off, like, way too soon.
Head west on US 30 West toward 600th Avenue. Continue on US 30 West for 1 mile.
The theater that I went to was fine. I mean, like I said, I just wish it wasn't so far away. But other than that, that's really it.
In half a mile, turn right onto 600th Avenue.
And because the GPS is just talking too much, I am done. So everyone have a good night, and I'll see you guys in the next review.